Get started here. Still a few minutes early. Only
Good
19.
morning, Professor.
Good morning. How you
How you
doing?
doing?
Very good. How are you?
Good, good.
Okay, did anyone else not get a paper they feel they're entitled to? I've had two.
Professor, nobody got an A?
You got to work for it.
I see that.
You got to struggle. Life is
I know
struggle.
you ain't let nobody ride.
That's right. I give you no quarter. All right, we're getting a good group. Any questions about the paper you got back probably last night? Most people should have gotten it back last night.
Not really. I just know that I have to make those corrections.
That is correct. You need to make the corrections. Anybody else? So the two people that were Sinab and Meyer, did you get your paper now?
Yeah, I got it, Professor. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yes, I got it. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Okay. Today, let's see, is it time yet? One more minute, we'll start. Still 8 students short. Okay, so let's see what the so your revisions are due. I'm giving you an extra week. So I had originally said next week, the 21st. Instead, I'll make it the 28th. All right, so.
Professor, did you
Yes.
happen to email me back the revisions or?
I did happen to email them back. Did you not get it?
I'm gonna check again. Thank you.
Okay. All right. I'll start with attendance. We've got most people here. It's daylight savings time. I wonder if a few people may have not, forgotten to change their clocks. But I'll start with attendance. Laurel was here. Eniemi. Eniemi. Is Eniemi Adekoye here? It's not. Shane.
I'm here.
Shakira Villa.
Here, Professor.
Santi Baldeo.
Here, Professor.
Okay, thank you. Shakazia. Shakazia Brown. Olga Senemo.
I'm here.
Okay. Rachel Cesar,
I'm here, Professor.
Wei Chen, Wei Chen, Khalif, Khalif Davis. All right. Terrence Dickerson, Priyanka,
Here.
GOA Feng, Jody and Gallimore,
Here.
Alexis Godley,
Here.
Kerwin,
I'm here.
okay. Maimuna Kabir,
Here.
Haim Klein, Griffin Langiel,
Here.
Ava Luck, Luke, Ava, okay. I see Sammy Mia, Sammy Mia, Anna Paglashvili,
Here. Yeah, Pogashvili.
Palagashvili. Is that close?
Close enough. Yeah.
Okay.
That's
Benjamin
fine. No, yeah, no one
Burrows.
can pronounce it. It's okay.
Palagashvili.
Yeah, it's clear. It's good. It's
What country is that from?
I was born in Moscow, but it's Georgian.
Oh, Georgian. Oh, interesting.
Yeah,
Benjamin
my grandfather.
Pearls,
Here, Professor.
Morgan Perry,
Here, Professor.
Zainab Rahman,
Here.
Crystal Ramos,
I'm here.
Elias Rodriguez,
I'm here.
Axa Shabir,
Here, Professor.
okay, Charlene St.
I'm
Fleur,
here. I'm here.
Kashawn Subrian, Kashawn, Idisham, I just saw, Sarita,
Here.
Asin Yagladir,
Here.
Hui Yun Zhu.
Here, Professor.
Okay, I'll call off the names of the people who didn't answer the first time. Laurel's here, right? Laurel Adams,
Here.
okay. Shakazia,
Here.
Wei Chen,
Here.
Khalif, Terrence, GOA, Feng, Haim Klein, Sammy Mia, and last but not least, Kashawn. Kashawn? Okay, Kashawn is here. Good morning to you, except it's afternoon already. Okay, so we will do today training. I'll do some writing stuff because we'll probably have some extra time. Are there any questions about the paper?
Yes.
I have a question.
Okay.
Oh, sorry. So is the feedback, how are we supposed to see the feedback on our paper?
You don't see it?
No, I just saw that like something's just been graded, but I don't see no feedback, no nothing of the paper.
Did you open the email?
No.
I emailed the papers back, so you need to open it with Word. Make sure you don't open it with your email reader. Save it to your computer and open it with Word, okay? Any other questions?
Yes, I had when we had joined the class last week, I explained that my writing was a little too much and it ended up being 2 pages. I wanted permission to resubmit and make it 1 page, but you told me to email it to you. And when you told me to email it to you, it was so late that I didn't really have time to resubmit it as 1 page. So I don't really like the grade that I received back. Because I feel like I did answer the questions that you asked me. It just was a little bit long. And then
Well,
you explained
everyone
that
has
my
a
writing
chance
was
to
a little
rewrite the
too
paper,
advanced.
so work on rewriting the paper and you can resubmit it. The second round is due in 2 weeks.
Okay, so when it comes to final grades, what is the one that really matters? The second one or the first one? Or the final one?
The second one.
Okay.
Professor,
Yes, sir.
Khalif is trying to get inside. He's telling
Yeah,
me to
so I
take
just
him in.
submitted it.
Okay.
I have Khalif. Khalif is there, right?
Yeah, good afternoon, Professor. What's going on?
Nothing much. We're just going over stuff.
Okay.
Okay,
Thanks,
so
Ish.
any other questions at this point? Okay, Khalif got me to watch the All-Star game. It was very good. Okay, today we're gonna do training. And then where's Khalif on here? That's my other class. Khalif down here. And then we're gonna move on. Before I do, are there any other questions about the paper? Get that out of the way.
Yes, the second round is the 21st.
That's no, I moved it up to the 28th.
And what does that consist of?
Well, follow what I told you to change and then rewrite it.
All right.
It would still be 1 page, correct?
Yeah, it should just be 1 page. Same restrictions, 1 page, double spaced.
Professor, are we required to do the rewrite, or if we're satisfied with the grade we got, we could just stay
I
as is?
strongly urge you to do the rewrite. Don't be lazy.
Okay.
You only had a few things in your case, so just try to go for the A.
Yeah, I thought it was an A, Professor.
You did well, but there were still a few points.
I know, I see him.
I have to motivate you to improve.
No, you went deep. You went insane, Professor.
Well, so you chose an insane person to be your professor. So
Listen, I love it.
you only learn.
Yeah,
No-
knock me
no-
off of my feet.
No gains without pains. No pain,
Yeah.
no gain.
No pain, no gain, right?
Okay. Anyone else?
Professor, I have a question.
Go ahead.
On mine, you made a correction. I think I put on there, hold on, let me just take a look. The sentence was, the ballot is for feedback on the features the customers would like to see. And then you made the change to put want to see. Can you just explain the difference? Would
Yeah,
like
use
versus
the
want.
present indicative for a statement of fact.
Okay.
Did I show you the uses of would there?
On the correction, no.
Okay, I didn't, a lot of the time I do attach that link.
I mean, you didn't ask for many changes on mine, just that one I didn't really understand. So
Yeah, good.
just for future reference.
Here. Okay, so basically you use will, what was would, forget will.
Well, I remember you told us not to use would.
You use would for a polite request. Okay, when you state facts, there's another side I was thinking of. When you state facts, use will or are, is to be the present indicative.
Okay. What site is that you're looking?
Yeah,
for?
hold it. Let me, I have it on my, I have it on here somewhere.
Where did you send the revision to? Like, where did you send your
You didn't get it to your email, whatever email you have on Web Central, you're supposed to keep that up to date. Okay, you didn't get the email?
How to use Word.
Okay.
I didn't get the email. Maybe you could email me at the email where you send me the articles, which is Yahoo.
That's different. Khalif, could you do me a favor and change your email in Web Central? You're supposed to have the right one there. Just log on to it and it gives you where to change your personal information.
What, from CUNY first?
No. Brooklyn portal.brooklyn.cuny.edu.
All right.
But I think you have to change it on CUNY first. It will go automatically into Web Central.
It does?
All right.
That's what I think.
I'm not sure.
I woke up. I opened my window. It's a cool breeze. I think time went forward. You know what I'm saying? I'm feeling good. But then when I click on Blackboard and I see my grade, it just, you know what I'm saying? Like I'm upset.
I'm sorry about that.
No, you ain't ruined my day. I'm just, you know what I'm saying? I'm a little on fire right now. So
I'll
I'm
tell
gonna see
you
what
why,
I could do.
getting back to wood, I'll tell you why I'm on the warpath about wood. The students at Brooklyn use wood like every other minute. I don't know why. I don't know what wood and Brooklyn College have in common. Most of the time you don't need would. Use will, are, am. This isn't exhaustive. This is a pretty reasonable list. First of all, the key to would is it's an unreal word. It's like a subjunctive kind of thing. Would that Cyrus were here. When I was studying Greek, I remember that, the subjunctive. In other words, something that's not real. I would love to visit New York. Well, for you, that's real, but I would love to be a professional football player or something like that. Okay, use would. You see, and when you use it like for everything, you're like sort of signaling to yourself nothing's real. That's what really worries me about this would thing. Like, I wish I would be a accountant. It's not, I'm going to be an accountant. You should be definite.
Yeah.
It's not like, oh, maybe I'll be an accountant. Would is like, oh, maybe I will if I'm lucky, but I probably won't. Will is, I am going to be. All right. So
It doesn't have that much impact.
It doesn't have as much. Actually, I would say it has a negative impact. It has the
Yep.
wrong kind of impact. All right. You don't want to give yourself the wrong impact. All right. And the other use is the past tense. Like you said, you would go for an unreal conditional. And again, would is a kind of a subjunctive-ish word. It kind of denotes unreality. So you say, if I won the lottery, I would travel the world. That's the second conditional. And the third conditional is the past tense. If I had worked harder, I would have passed the test. Okay, so those uses of would, I mean, would is kind of an unreal word. You know, I use a definite word. Don't be wishy-washy. Would not as to refuse. I would not in a million years. Past actions in the past, especially repeated ones. When I was young, I would do my homework. You use it for polite requests, like when you're talking to someone, would you please pass the butter? All right. But generally, if you have a fact to state, use the basic present indicative, am, are, is, or if you want to talk about a real future, use will. The correct tense for the future that's real is will. When I get home tonight, I will turn the TV on. No would there. When I get home tonight, I would turn the TV on. Does that seem likely to you? It's like a big question. Will I turn the TV on or wouldn't I? So if it's true for that, why isn't it true for your career goals?
Yeah, this is helpful, Professor. Thank you. I appreciate
You're
it.
welcome. I'm glad I shared with you, asked me about that, because it's something I've kind of cooked up myself. And I think it's very important though, because you guys overuse would. You know, you just remember, you're dealing in the real world. You're not dealing in a fantasy world. The time for games is over. Now you got to deal with real results, real things that are going to matter. You know, a lot of people never grow up. You know, it's true. I've seen this firsthand. If you can avoid growing up, a lot of people do. I think that's one of the problems with the millennials. Like their parents have a lot of money, so they stay at home. You know, they live off their parent. They don't feel motivated to work, and you know, nobody's like prodding
Professor, my
them.
parents are millennials.
Your parents are millennials?
Yeah.
Well,
So,
wait,
that's kind of a
what's a
stereotype.
millennial?
My parents had me very young. Well, a
So
millennial
when
starts
were
actually
when
in
were your
70.
parents
My
born?
mom was born in 76.
76?
My mom was born in 76. She's still a
Oh, that's
millennial.
not millennial.
That's not millennial.
76
That's like
is a
on the
millennial.
border of millennial.
No, no,
and
no.
That's literally on the
No.
border of the end of the millennial. Yes,
It's
it is.
young,
If you
but it's not.
Google it,
Okay,
if you
I'm
Google
Googling
it,
it
I was
right now.
surprised too. Yeah, it's actually, it starts way way earlier than we think. A
I thought
millennial.
millennial was done in the early
Okay, the
2000s.
sixth generation. Okay, I'm gonna read off.
No.
This came right up. Okay, I'll put it on the screen so nobody has any doubts. And this is related to HR, incidentally. Baby boomers, 46 to 64. That's me. Generation Jones. I never
Okay,
even
she's a
heard of that.
Generation X, but she's close.
Born 55 to 65. Generation X, 65 to 80. That's not close. They were in school.
No,
I mean,
81, 76 and 81. That's not a big difference.
Xennials,
I'm a
77
millennial.
to 83.
Yeah, she's an Xennial, so she's in the middle. Like technically,
Okay.
she's not that far.
Millennials are 81 to 96.
That's
Yeah,
It's
my
earlier
mom's
than I
not-
thought.
my
You're
mom's
right
not.
about that. Actually,
Yeah,
I
it's a
stand
lot of them.
corrected. I would have thought they were later. I'm thinking of my niece who was born 95. She was born like the year before I got married, I think, or the year I got married. So basically, she's a millennial, early millennial. And now, let's see, you guys, you're your generation Alpha. Is that true, or your generation Z? No, 10 is.
I'm a millennial.
I'm a millennial.
I'm a
Yeah.
millennial too.
I'm a
Z.
millennial.
I'm 26.
Z.
I feel old.
Generation Z, 90s. Any Generation Z?
Professor, you gotta put that chart away,
Z.
man.
Z. Z.
Okay. All right, so
Put
basically
the
those
chart
are
away,
the-
bro.
that's HR. Supposedly each one is different. I don't really believe in that much, but I think there are some patterns. But basically, people are people. They don't change that much, you know. If you sat down in a cafe in ancient Rome and you could speak Latin well enough to understand what was going on, there'd be the same kind of people you see now. There'd be differences, of course, but they'd probably be more likely to kill you. But so anyway, where was I? Yeah, I think one of the you know, you need to confront reality. Reality is real. You know, you need to deal with reality, and that's true in business and any kind of career. You have to deal with the real world. You know, it's not a what if kind of thing. It's like you're dealing with reality here and now. So I'm trying to get you to think that way. And if you use wood, you don't deal with reality. You know, I don't want to sound too I don't know what the right word is, doctrinaire about it, but I'm trying to get everyone not to use wood. All right, so basically, yeah, if you did well and you got a B or a B plus or 8 or 9 students in that category, there won't be too much to change. You know, obviously, I graded you less if you had more changes. I'm trying to get you to change it. Okay, today we'll start with the stuff on training and development. This is very important. What's the difference between education and training? You guys are going through education. Is that the same thing as training? Is it related? If so, how?
I would say yes, it's kind of related because they're both meant to help you advance to the next level eventually in whatever.
True. Okay, so they're certainly related. They're both forms of what's called human capital. When you invest in yourself, that's human capital, whether you take care of your health or your psychological well-being. You develop good habits. That's human capital. Okay, and part of that is training and education, work experience. That's all human capital. So they're both human capital, but what are they different at all, or are they the same thing?
I think
Training.
they're very different.
Okay.
I think education is informative and training is experience.
All right. So what you're sort of getting at is that education is a little broader. It's like knowledge for its own sake.
I would say it's theory, not practice.
Theory, not practice. Okay.
Yeah.
That goes back to Aristotle, who had very little interest. The techne to him, the crafts and the skills of practice, such as we're learning in this class, he considered that fit for slaves. Slaves would learn techne, the practical stuff. The real stuff, the liberal arts, what we call the liberal arts, you know, that would be, that's what true citizens would learn. Of course, to be a citizen, you had to have a certain, well, you had to be born there and you had to have a certain economic status. So basically, that sort of distinction still exists. You know, education is for its own sake, or it's for citizenship. Aristotle certainly emphasized that man is not only the rational but also the political animal, and citizenship to him carried a great deal of importance. In order to participate in the political life of the city-state was an important part of it. And unfortunately, we don't have that. I don't think we put that much weight on citizenship as we should. Too many people don't, you know, participate, or they say, oh, it's too confrontational and stuff, and it turns people aren't getting involved. But anyway, education is broader and it's, you know, more for its own sake, whereas training is focused on improving work competencies, what Aristotle would have called techne, what the root of our word technology. And basically the stuff, you know, whether it's fixing things or managing, running things, working, those kinds of things, those competencies are fit for training. Development means long-term improvement of competencies. Training is a shorter term. If you learn how to improve your Excel skills or your, whatever they're using now in businesses, Oracle or whatever, if you learn to improve those skills, that's training. You're learning for today. Improve your interpersonal skills that you need on the job now, that's training. If you improve your socialization that you'll need later on, that's development. Development is a longer term. Now, I'm
I
very,
think like,
go ahead.
sorry, oh, I'm so sorry. I think like another way to understand it is, for example, we could memorize the textbook and then know everything that is in there by heart. That doesn't mean that per se I know exactly how to put it into work.
Oh, I couldn't agree more. Rote memorization alone isn't education, but you should be able to read the textbook.
No,
Okay.
yeah, I understand. I mean, like, that's
Reading and writing
yeah.
foundations. It's like a house. You need the foundations. You need to read, write, do the math. Then you build the house. Then on top of that foundation, you build the balustrades and the, whatever the architectural terms are, the fancier stuff that is part of education. So that a lot of that is critical thinking, learning to think for yourself, learning to question and not just recite what people say. If somebody comes out of school and all they can do is repeat what someone else told them and read a newspaper and repeat what the newspaper says, they haven't been educated. The person who comes out of school and says, I'll subscribe to the Economist magazine, but I'm going to question everything they say and think about it and raise doubts, that's education. All right. Where you think about things, you question it, you use counter evidence, and the conclusion is less important than the reasoning in education. If you say some conclusion is the main thing, that's not education. You've just foreclosed free thinking. And we know what the right answer is. The science is settled. This is not education. This is rote advocacy. That's not the kind of thing that education should do. So basically, education is much broader. It encourages independent thought. Now, do companies want well-educated employees? Or do they want employees who are trained in narrow competencies to do the right job without asking questions? I once had a boss who said, I said, well, I don't think that's true. And he said, it's not your job to think. All right, that's an old cliche. But I mean, I was at a point in life where I had 2 master's degrees. I had worked for 6 years. I mean, for God's sake, when are you supposed to think? What's the purpose of all that? So basically, I would say a lot of the companies don't want you to have too much of an education. And I think that's part of why Americans tend not to be very questioning. They tend to believe the media, for example, although that's changing a little in recent years, but they tend to believe what they're told and be accepting of authority. And I think that's a sign of lack of education, not education. So basically, education and training are two, maybe even opposite in a certain way. I try to do both. I mean, it's very important to be successful in your career. So I think you need to learn the competencies needed and the long-term competencies, and you also need to be socialized and learn how to deal with people. And you also need to have an understanding of technology. But the thing is, those kind of skills are often the direct opposite of what you need to think for yourself. But you're not going to get rich unless you think for yourself. All right, you'll be a good employee if you don't think for yourself. You know, it's like being the sheep and the wolf. The wolf has to think for himself because, or herself, because they have to outfox or outwolf the shepherd. But the sheep don't have to think; they just do what the shepherd tells them to do. But if you're that kind of person, if you're just a sheep, you'll never become rich, because the way the society is set up, you can't get rich doing what you're supposed to do. You can only get rich by overcoming the constraints that have been set up for you. And those constraints are specifically your inability to save money. In order to become rich, you have to be able to save money. So first and foremost, you need to put money away. Second of all, you have to think outside the box. You have to think in ways that are different from others. That's why, you know, when everybody buys the same stock, they're headed for disaster. They're sheep headed for the slaughter. You know, like a stock like Tesla, you know, we all love Elon Musk. The time to buy that was when no one ever heard of it. But the stock right now, Tesla stock, is selling at a P ratio of 1,088. To put that in perspective, General Motors, let's look at what General Motors multiple is. Is selling at what, 9 times earnings or something? General Motors is selling at, well, 14 times earnings. So General Motors sells like 10 times the number of cars of Tesla. It's selling at 14 times earnings. Tesla is selling at 1,000 times earnings. That means that they'll have to sell 60 times, 80 times, 75 or so times the number of cars that GM sells to get to the point where GM is. But they can't even, GM only sells like 10 times what Tesla sells. So basically, to sell 75 times the number of cars that they sell, they would have to sell more than all the cars that are sold in the country, maybe in the world. So, you know, obviously, it can't possibly be a fair price. Of course, they bought Bitcoin, but that too is like a speculative bubble. So, you know, they're compiling one speculative bubble on the next, and what that does is it like draws people who think like sheep, all in the same way. And this was observed by this guy Charles McKay in this famous book, Popular Delusions and the Madness of Crowds, that people often think in the same way. And when they do, it leads to disaster. You know, it leads to stock market bubbles and all kinds of things, lynchings and riots and all that sort of thing. So basically, you know, the way to become successful is to not think like everybody else. So on the one hand, you need the training because you need to work and you need to survive. On the other hand, you have to learn not to think like other people, because you don't want to, the way you make money is by doing things a little differently. So basically, firms, though, have every reason to want to train people. They have a little bit less reason to want to educate people, although the basics of education, the prerequisites, the stuff like reading, writing, and arithmetic, the 3 R's, that stuff they need, because that's sort of the skills you need. They need socialization skills. They need competencies. They need the stuff you're learning in this class, a lot of it, not sort of my side remarks, but the main body of information. You could view that as training as well as education, because you're being trained to be an HR person. This is all material you can actually use as an HR manager, certainly relevant background. So basically, how does a company know how to train people? It's not a theoretical thing. We already talked about it. You have to look at the jobs themselves and say, what do you need to know to do these jobs? So basically, the first step is what we talked about a week or two ago, which was job analysis. Okay, you need to do it in training. The job analysis applied to training is called needs analysis. You need to do a needs analysis when you do training. And you need to figure out what does the job actually require. So the same techniques we talked about with job analysis, observation, surveys, interviews, diaries, all these things can apply to needs analysis, determining what the content of the training for a specific job is. Of course, that's training for actual jobs is not the only reason to train people. There are a lot of other reasons. HR issues, organizational issues. So if you're training if you're doing training for a company, the first thing you want to know is what are the problems in the company that require training. Part of it, of course, is going to be the actual job. Sometimes you have to train people for jobs. You can't hire experienced people all the time. So you train them. Insurance company trains salespeople, for example. A company will hire a trained secretary. People pay for their own training for that. But frequently, they have to be trained about a lot of other things if they're going to move up, such as the company culture and stuff like that. So basically, the environment of the company, as well as the needs analysis, leads to key training design choices, which in turn results in training outcomes, which in turn results in evaluation. You also have to make decisions like who receives the training, who gives the training, and all of these are relevant to a company's training policies. One big reason to provide training is a shift in organizational strategy. I once interviewed a guy that works for Cablevision on Long Island, which is the cable company there. And this was probably about 15 to 20 years ago. And the guy said to me, well, one of the big areas for training is when we change our technology. So when the technology changes, their technicians obviously need to be trained in the technology. The salespeople need to be able to explain the technology. So they have to go through a lot of training when technology advances. Other reasons for training: regulation, environmental shifts. A big area we're witnessing with our governor right now, sexual harassment. I guess they don't have a sexual harassment training program for governors because he got caught. But basically, they do, most companies do have, it's a very big area for training right now, and it will be. We'll talk a little bit about that. So you have a whole host of reasons. The thing that companies, I once did a survey of companies, and the one thing they said they really want, that they always need training in, is interpersonal skills. Emotional intelligence, interpersonal skills, how to interact with people. These are areas. It's not so much the technical side of training, although with technology changing, that can be important. But the thing that's perennial that they always need is the subject that Dale Carnegie wrote about in the 1920s, and still in his great book, it's still a great book, How to Win Friends and Influence People. That's really the stuff you need to know in business, and they always need training in it. All right, so basically, so who needs line managers are a big source of ideas. They need to, what jobs are difficult to do, where the shortfalls are. The employees need to cooperate. Your book talks about the HR triad. This is one of the areas where the HR triad plays a big role. because the training people in HR need to devise the programs, but they can't do it without input, very heavy input from the line managers and also employees who come up with ideas for training and who demonstrate shortfalls. So the HR professionals, the HR triad is very dynamic here. The line managers need to be involved, the HR department needs to be involved, and the employees need to be involved, if only as being trainees. So basically, when you go through a training design process, you start with an organizational analysis and you assess the organizational culture and climate. And you say, what aspects of this organization are going to influence the kind of training we need to do? What is the corporate culture here? What are the problems? Often the organization is going to be the basis of the orientation employees receive. That's part of training too. When you first come on, almost all companies of any stature give an orientation, and I'm just thinking back in the ones I went to through the years. It's funny, I don't remember doing one at Johnson & Johnson, but I remember them in other companies. And they probably did have one, I just forgot. But basically, they tell you about what the company policies are and what the benefits are and what you should do and what you shouldn't do and things like that. And so that's part of training too, the beginning orientation. So you start out with an organizational analysis where you assess the climate and the culture and what kinds of training are needed related to that. You also will follow through with a job needs analysis, and you'd look at the needs analysis for the specific jobs. And you would look at what kinds of training needs there are in the different jobs. You might also do a person needs analysis, and a person needs analysis, instead of looking at the jobs, you look at the people in the jobs. Are there shortfalls in their own backgrounds that need to be addressed? Are there things that incumbents don't know or lack that they need to be trained in? Often you can rely on the employees themselves. You can ask them, what don't you know that you need to know? How can we train you? How can we provide training that will help you do your job better? That's one area where the employees can play a big role in the HR triad. Issues to consider include the question of insight. People need to know what they need to learn. Often they don't know. A big place where this plays a role is health and safety, which is also a big area. I mean, there should really, every company should have ample health and safety training. And that's really why that horrible incident at Bhopal, who knows the story of Bhopal, India, with Union Carbide, the Union Carbide explosion? Anyone know that tale of woe? No, nobody knows? All right. Basically, it's probably the worst industrial, other than Chernobyl. It was probably it was definitely one of the worst. I shouldn't say the worst, it's probably ones I don't know about, but Dabol was one of the worst industrial accidents of all time. And I meant Bhopal, I'm sorry. Bhopal, I used the wrong place. Union Carbide, I want to get the right statistics, hadn't trained the staff. They hadn't trained them well. And they were dealing with an extremely dangerous chemical. Okay, here's a retrospective 33 years later that was written in 2017. So it happened in 84. official records are that 3,787 people were killed. But it was later reduced. They then thought 2,259 were killed. However, the true death rate may have been as high as 10,000. The Bhopal gas leak caused 5 million. No, that can't be right. According to this, 5,580,000 injuries. I don't think that's right. I'll have to check that. And 3,900 severely disabling injuries. About 3,000 people died of poisonous gas within a few hours of the incident. And if you look at what caused it, that's definitely not the worst industrial accident of all time. There was one recently in Bangladesh where something like 1,100 people were killed. But it was certainly among the worst. The factory collapse in Bangladesh just fairly recently, within the last couple of years. 2013, well, it's more than a couple, but 1,100 people killed. So, you know, these accidents do happen, but Bhopal is definitely one of the worst ones. And basically what caused it was that the employees weren't trained. So when they were dealing with this poison gas and it escaped, and instead of dealing with the leak and doing what they were supposed to do, they ran away. And when they ran away, it just exploded and it killed thousands of people. So in other words, it was due to lack of training. And you see this over and over again, that lack of training with regard to health and safety leads to all kinds of terrible consequences. And the companies that have the best safety records develop a knowledge base and train their employees and then hold them to the training. So training has like huge ramifications. It's not just how to do the job optimally. It also can save lives. It can reduce lawsuits. There are a lot of important ramifications of training. All right. So basically,
Professor?
Yeah.
So I have something to add on your example of the Bangladesh explosion. There is a documentary called The True Cost. So it's actually about, you know, how the fashion industry exploits Asian workers. So if the documentaries, you know, explicitly talk about the explosion, that it caused by mismanagement, but also caused by, you know, the needs for lower costs. So what it means is the companies over Asian country would compete for the you know, the orders from mostly American companies, fashion industry. So what they would do is to lower, you know, the cost of, for example, the materials, the buildings quality, and the wages for the workers. So it led to the explosions when the company on, you know, in Bangladesh, you know, they decided to put cheap, you know, cheap buildings and let the workers, you know, to work over there. So yeah, it talks about, you know, the dangers and how, you know, companies like the fashion, you know, in the industry, how they, you know, how they also play a part leading to the explosion. So if
Okay.
you're interested, yeah, you can look at it. It's called the True Cost.
Very good. Okay, I'll take a look. That's very interesting. And really, are they really saving money? When something like that happens, the costs are astronomical. And while not all of it's borne by the company, it'll undoubtedly bankrupt the company. just in terms of liability and so on. I don't know about the legal system in Bangladesh, but I have little doubt that that company will continue. That it won't continue. That they'll be closed, and basically, so the companies that do that are very short-sighted, and that's really what gets you into the HR stuff. That in order to run a company well, you shouldn't make stupid decisions like that. You shouldn't try to economize on building safety. They had built extra stories above the safe level, and they had done it against the code. In a poor country, the inspection isn't done as well. It's probably corrupt. They probably bribe people. I haven't studied the story well, but basically, what that led to was, there was a reason why the building code prohibited that high a building with that type of foundation, and so collapsed. And the result was a huge human tragedy, but it was also a financial disaster for the company itself. True, the American company that bid for the contract probably didn't suffer much, but I think ultimately it's hard to say. I mean, if they're going to do business in the third world, to what degree should they be manufacturing those companies? I don't know. I don't know how easy it is for, like, if you are Nike to go to wherever Nikes are made. I have no idea, and but I know it's in the third world, and oversee the plants. I suppose they could do that, and it might be smart to do it. But again, the HR factors aren't always there. Those kinds of issues are viewed as long term. I think it's kind of like the coal miners, where in the short run they might make money off a mine that's not safe, but in the long run, it'll cost them more. So that's why companies have improved their health and safety practices over time, because that not having accidents drastically reduces costs. So if you want to be profit maximizing, you want to have a safe company. So basically, there should be a reason to improve the health and safety, but a lot of companies are very short-sighted, and that's an example of it. And it's an interesting one. So there are a lot of issues there, but basically, building those extra stories didn't save money. It cost money. They destroyed the whole building, and they destroyed a lot of lives. I don't know if there's, what the legal system is like in Bangladesh. I don't know if they could sue, or people could sue for damages, but clearly they've bankrupted the company, and if not the individuals. You could make a case that the corporate veil should be pierced in that situation, because there was overt criminality. I mean, it wasn't just in the normal course of business, but you're talking about true criminal behavior in extending the building, and they killed a lot of people, and there's no reason why the executive shouldn't be arrested and tried for murder. But of course, systems don't always work that way. In the case of Union Carbide, the Indian government did arrest at one point the CEO of Union Carbide, but they let him go. The thing is, Union Carbide no longer exists. Bhopal, I confused them with Dabhol, because I think that was where the Enron plant was. There was an Enron. I think there was an Enron plant there. That's what yeah, that was the Enron thing. The thing is, Union Carbide is gone. That accident destroyed the whole company. And you could say the same in a lot of the companies that were really bad abusers of health and safety principles, like Johns Manville, which made asbestos and didn't tell people that it caused cancer, even though they knew. And eventually they got shut down and they were declared bankrupt, and someone else took them over. So basically, in the long run, the companies pay for this kind of stupidity. In the short run, you have a man, and this is why managements are often, they're only there for a few years. Like the CEO gets paid for this year's stock price increases and then quits. So they're only there for a few years, and so they're able to escape any cost. That happened in Enron too. I mean, people who knew that Enron was corrupt. There was this guy, John Wing, I think his name was, who was, he knew early on. He lives in upstate New York. One of his relatives got married recently. I saw the name and I realized who it was. But basically, he had worked at Enron, and he knew they were gonna sink. And he left. Yeah, I have a picture of him in front of me. He died in 2015. He left Enron with like $200 million. He made a fortune there. He pulled out right at the top. He knew it was going to collapse eventually. He got the heck out of there. A number of them did. And, he made off like a bandit, and, he got out before it collapsed. And this is often what happens in these companies because the executives are very short term. So that, when we talk about executive compensation, that's like a related thing. Like a lot of these guys should be paid long term so that they don't collect their pay until you actually see the results of what they did. And often what they've done can take 10 years to evolve. So, there's a lot of interesting questions there about compensation and the role of the corporate structure in causing this and so on.
Professor, quick
Yeah.
question. Do you know what happened with the executives that dealt with the big, huge oil fire on the Deep Horizon? That
I don't.
massive oil fire. I don't know what happened. Like, I know about the fire and
You're
the
talking about
damage, but I
BP,
don't know what happened to the executives.
the BP thing.
Yeah.
Well, let's look. Okay, the company paid 5.9 billion to states and local government entities and will ultimately pay 20 billion, the largest settlement. All right. So back in 2016, a lot of other companies were forced to close because they could no longer drill, and they were trying to sue. I don't see anything about personal liability. Usually you don't, unless there's some kind of really a Department of Justice, a Department of Justice criminal investigation resulted in charges against 4 lower-ranking BP employees. So none of I don't think, the former BP executive David Rainey was acquitted of charges. He manipulated spill-related calculations, and a former engineer was convicted of obstruction of justice for deleting a string of text messages. A judge ordered a new trial, an allegation. Ultimately, Kurt Mix was this engineer, guilty to a less serious charge and was sentenced to 6 months of probation. So basically very little in the way of criminal charges, but huge, that's a good example. I mean, that's not so much an HR issue as a environmental issue, but it's related to health and safety for sure. And basically, they ended up paying 20 billion. I mean, even for a big company like BP, that's enormous. They're lucky to still exist after that. So they paid a big price. I don't know if it covers the extent of the damage that occurred, but it's certainly a big price. And so can you really say that doing these kinds of things is a way to make money? It seems to me that there's plenty of risk and plenty of chance for disaster to the company, and that frequently results in these short-sighted companies going out of business and losing everything. So, you know, and I think, you know, training, again, I don't know the details of the BP case, but I have little doubt that if the employees had been better trained and better prepared, they wouldn't have done what they did. There was also the case of the Exxon Valdez back in the 80s. And again, this was totally HR related. The ship captain was an alcoholic. They hadn't replaced him. It's not so much training as lack of control. And in 89, it was a similar thing to the BP thing, and a massive oil spill resulted, causing immense environmental damage.
For the for
You know, I
the
think HR can often play a role in these things, either by training or by better controlling, firing bad people, things like that.
From what I understand about BP, the deep horizon, is that they one of the workers on the drill was telling them that something was wrong and they wasn't listening.
Yeah.
They was
Yep.
telling them the something about the pressure, and it might do a back. It's called when the oil will come back up and it will cause damage to the drill or something and cause a big disaster. And they was warning them that that is a possibility, but
And they didn't
no
listen.
one listened.
Yeah. Something similar happened in the case of Chernobyl. There was also a similar thing, but there was also a cover up. The people who designed the plant knew there was a flaw and they hid it. So the reason they thought they could get away with it was an improbable situation, but it occurred. It occurred. But there was also the employee in Chernobyl was warning the manager, and the manager thought that they had this sort of emergency switch, and he was positive it would always work, but then it didn't work because of the flaw. So basically that, you know, that was probably, you know, the worst disaster of all time. BP is also terrible. Exxon Valdez, they're all really bad ones. And basically a lot of them could have been improved either through HR or just better general management, if not training per se. You know, training can often play a critical role. Companies like DuPont, I'll talk about them when we do health, safety and health and safety. Companies like DuPont have excellent training programs, and that's a big part of why they have good safety records. DuPont handles dangerous chemicals just as Union Carbide did, but they've never had problems. And the same thing with the nuclear Navy. They have always had a perfect safety record. They invented the nuclear power plant under Admiral Rickover. Admiral Rickover was the inventor of the nuclear power plant, and he created the nuclear Navy. They put it under his command, and in many ways, he reported directly to the Senate. There were reasons for that. That situation is no longer the case, but they have their own training and very stylized management practices that address the safety issue first and foremost, which is why they've never had an accident. In contrast, the public utilities have. You know, there was the one in Japan and the Chernobyl and 3 Mile Island in America and others. And so basically, if you study the nuclear Navy's practices, training is a big part of it. Training and a lot of other HR issues are a big part of it. So training has huge ramifications. And some of the most important social concerns regarding both health and safety and environmental issues, which is indirectly an outgrowth of health and safety practice, are related to training. Okay, so it's an area that has a lot of ramifications, and it's also strategic because you can't really change what you do unless you train the employees. Okay, so the outcomes of training can be skill-based, cognitive, knowledge, emotional. You could train people to feel certain ways, have different attitudes. Often organizational change requires that. Now, in conducting training, so basically the basic training model, I'll share the screen with you. The basic training model is, so you start out with the needs analysis, and then once you see what the needs are and what people need to be trained, then you design the training, and then there are outcomes in terms of behaviors, and then you evaluate the training. And what I'm going to say is that this evaluation part is not done sufficiently. The needs analysis and the training design but those are probably less important than the evaluation. So basically, once you've done the needs analysis, then you design the training. There are a lot of interesting issues. What makes education and training interesting is that you vary the approaches. So you don't just lecture the way I am, but rather you add films, you add exercises and so on. So a big part of training design is like spicing up the training so that trainees are interested in what they do. All right. The big thing now is e-learning. I took a couple of training programs here at CUNY recently. I took the workplace violence training. I took the sexual harassment training. Everyone's required to take those once a year. So I take them every year, and it's all done by online. So it's all done online. I also, over the break, I took the 6-hour class for the driver's class for the state. I just bought a new car, so my insurance went up. And I rather than pay the full premium, if you take the 6-hour class, you get a 10% reduction.
What did you get? Did you get the Cayenne?
Did I get the what?
Did you get the Porsche? Or did you get the G-Wagon?
I got a BMW 850.
Oh, let's get it.
You want to see it?
What year?
This year. No, brand
You
new.
fancy, huh? Okay. Generation Alpha.
You didn't know that the professors drive cars like that. I'm probably the only one. Let's see.
Now, my other professor got a Toyota.
You're the That's right. Here it is. I got a white one, but they're showing it. Here, I'll screen share.
Yeah, flex a little bit. It's a good day to flex.
You from Brooklyn, professor?
For sure.
Originally from Astoria.
But where you at now? Brooklyn?
That's the 850 Li.
What's that?
You got the 8 series?
Yeah.
Ooh,
That's
lit. You got the M8, boy.
The 850. Yeah, here it is.
You got the coupe or the 4-door?
The 4-door.
You got the M series?
Yeah.
Yo,
you got the lit. Oh nah, you official. That's
I'll tell
crazy
you, when
because I've been
people,
looking at
when
that
people,
car.
the guy in front of me is driving a little slow, I have no trouble passing him. It's like, it's close to being a race car. Yeah, and it's the interior is divine. It's really, it's like
one of the best cars out right now.
That 850 Li 8 series.
Yeah,
Justin. Wait, is it the white silver version?
No, it's like a pearl white. Both my cars this color.
We have a
This is the
we
car,
could
actually.
we have a similar car. I have the M4.
Do you?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. That's cool.
Wait, so what did you like you leasing it? Like what you doing? You
Yeah.
pay straight cash?
No, I went in there. I thought I was going to get a Lexus, and I went in there. I had the money. I was going to pay cash, to be honest. And I went in there with the money to buy a Lexus. I was going to go to the Lexus dealer. My friend,
Can someone mute themselves? Whoever that is.
Jesus. Okay, there we go. So I went there. I went to the dealer with my money, and my friend, my wife's friend. My wife, I don't know if I told you, my wife passed away like a year ago. So I've been on my own. Her friends come over sometimes.
Condolences.
And thank you.
I'm
And
so sorry.
she and this other guy, thank you. This other guy said to me, "Look at the BMWs." I said, "All right." So we all went down to the BMW in Poughkeepsie, and I was going to get the 5 Series, which is similar to a Lexus. I wasn't sure I was going to get a BMW. I thought we'd just look and I'd go to the Lexus. But then I saw that car and I said, "Holy shit, I got to get that car." So I did. So I used the money as a down payment. I borrowed the rest. So I bought it on credit. But
you got the hottest car out in the whole Brooklyn right now.
That's with the big nose. That's the
I'm
8
from
Series
Brian
with
Beach.
the
I'm from
big
Russian
nose.
neighborhood. So
With the
I know
wild
the
nostril.
car right now.
Did you get the automatic or
yeah, it's automatic. Yeah.
Hey,
okay.
look, Professor, your new nickname is Moneybag Mitch.
No, don't call me that, please. No.
Yo, I'm dead, Khalif.
Yeah. don't call me that. No. I don't want to make the other professors jealous. All right. So basically, where were we? Oh yeah, I was talking about driver training. Yeah, so a lot of training is online now. So you should do that. I mean, you can reduce your premium, especially at your age. You probably pay a decent sized premium. You can reduce it by 10% by taking the online driver training. It just takes 6 hours. So there's e-learning apprenticeships, or where there's like a formal program, like like in the crafts and the construction crafts, they have that, like plumbing apprentices, things like that. Internships, a lot of you guys are thinking of, and that's absolutely right. That's part of training. Job rotation, what you saw at SAS, where they move people around the company a little bit. When there's sometimes programs that you don't see them too often anymore, but there used to be programs like they would hire a college student and then have them work for 6 weeks in 5 different departments. So they see like a bunch of different departments, see which one they like the best, or work where they did the best, or whatever. There's also supervisory assistance and mentoring, coaching, advice from your direct supervisor. So a lot of that is on the job type of stuff, and that's the most common kind of training. On-site training would include things like corporate universities, training programs, programmed instruction, interactive videos, stuff like that. Off the job would be formal courses, going to colleges, simulations, assessment centers, role playing. Those are all different forms of training. Simulations are where you practice flying an airplane in a simulator. Those things cost millions to really have a good one, but obviously you're gonna learn a lot there. The buses have them now too. So when you go for your bus driver's license, you first start on the simulator and then you move to the bus. That way you don't make any stupid mistakes, with the bus. Assessment centers, I think I talked about them already. It's where you're given a bunch of exercises. There's a facility and you're given exercises, and the line managers and the psychologists observe from behind a one-way mirror. They look at you in a meeting or doing a mock sales call or stuff like that, and you train people. One of the big questions is transfer of training. When you train someone, there's always a question, will they actually do the things you're training them on the job? Like, you take the driver training course, and they, and it tells you to only drive so fast that, stay within the speed limit. There's huge reasons why you don't drink and drive. It's fairly obvious that you shouldn't do these things. And then, in practice, people say, oh, what the heck, another drink, you only live once. And, so people forget. You don't always transfer to the actual situation. And that's the key when you're studying, when you're doing training, that transfer occurs, that you get trained and you actually do the stuff on the job. There's all kinds of fun ways to make training interesting and improve the quality of the training. Less is more. So adult education usually means that you don't do quite as much as you do in college, and you kind of focus on a few main points, and you make it interesting, and you include games and practicing and stuff like that. Okay, now that said, how do you evaluate training? There's three basic ways. This management consultant named Don Kirkpatrick, who was a professor at the University of Wisconsin, devised this model of training evaluation that's useful. He said there are three basic levels of evaluating training. Level one is reactions. So like at the end of the class, the college asks you, evaluate this class. All right, that's short-term reaction. You tell people what you think of the class, you enjoyed it, or you didn't enjoy it. It doesn't really say, when you give your short-term reaction, that doesn't really tell anyone how much you learned. You might have had a difficult experience and been driven out of your mind, but you learned a great deal, but you're angry about it. And so you say the course sucks, but you actually learned a lot. And over time, people who take that class would learn a great deal, but because it made you feel uncomfortable, you might give it a bad rating. Okay, so reactions are meaningful. They tell you how good the teacher is, basically. Like, does the teacher make it interesting? Does the teacher help you learn? It doesn't tell you really how much you've adopted. Now, there's also the issue of transfer in corporate training. If you go through a training program and you had a good time, they did a lot of fun things, you learned a lot, it was an overall very beneficial experience. And you learn, you can test the learning by giving someone a quiz like we do in school. So you can test someone's knowledge, and that's also a kind of a short-term test. You can also see, did they learn the behaviors by having a live simulation. Like if you're training someone to do first aid, have them do the first aid in front of you and show that they can do it. That's a good way to test the knowledge. The trouble is, once they leave the thing, are they really going to apply the first aid that way? Okay, does transfer occur? Okay, so basically Kirkpatrick said that there are three levels. The short-term level is where you evaluate responses. A longer term level is where, or let's call it a medium term level, is whether you can go observe the person on the job and see that transfer has occurred and that they're doing it the right way. So you could see, was there a change of behavior? And then a long-term method would be looking at the organization itself. So you would be looking at, has the company become more profitable? Has sales gone up? If you're doing a training of salespeople, you can give half the salespeople the training, the other half something else. And you want to be careful when you do a study, not to have like a control group where you give nothing. Rather, you want to have a control group where you give something. So, for example, if you're studying what's the effect of lighting on employment, on work productivity, you give the lighting to one group, but then you give like improved lunch, an improved lunch to somebody else, or some other kind of thing that's not relevant, but changing the work conditions a little bit. The reason is the so-called Hawthorne effect. The Hawthorne effect is when, I think I mentioned this, the Human Relations School was studying the Hawthorne electric plant. They studied lighting, and when they raised lighting, productivity went up. They did this over months. And then as they started to reduce the lighting to check, the productivity went up further. It didn't decline. So they thought at first it was the lighting, but then they realized it was the intervention itself that caused the increased productivity. So, you know, in any kind of controlled, any kind of experiment, you want to have controls. That's ideal. You know, that idea of double-blind study, you've heard in the news a few times about, you know, studying the vaccines and stuff. A double-blind study will have controls. So like when they give the drug to part of the population, the other part gets a placebo. So they think they're getting the drug, because even in biological terms, when people feel that they're being treated, things will change biologically. It's not even limited to psychologically. So in the Hawthorne experiment, the experiment itself changed them psychologically. And what they needed to do was reduce the lighting in the other department at the same time they were increasing the lighting in the first department, and see how they differed. But it was only by chance that they did this extra control, and they found that the effect of the lighting was irrelevant, or rather it was the intervention that made a difference. So basically, the longer term kind of checks are the most important. So this would mean, like, if you implement a training program for your salespeople, have sales gone up? If you implement a training program to stop sexual harassment, you ask over the long term, have lawsuits gone down? All right, now how do you do this? You look at both experimental and quasi-experimental design. You look at, first of all, quasi-experimental. There was a famous book. If you ever get a PhD in social science, you'll probably read it. Campbell and Stanley, quasi-experimental design. And what they talk about there is when you're looking at things like differential outcomes due to a treatment of groups of employees in a company, or differential outcomes of students who've been subjected to a reading program in a school. It's not really an experiment because they're in their natural setting and there are a lot of uncontrolled factors. And the book quasi-experimental design goes into all the threats to the validity of this kind of experiment, and they're voluminous. The threats are unending. So in other words, there could have been some social things occurring. There could have been things happening in the company. Yep, book's still sold. Experimental. I got the title wrong though. Experimental and quasi-experimental designs for research. It's a really interesting book. I mean, it's voluminous, and it's interesting in the sense that there's so many different reasons that these experiments can fall apart. It's all keying off the Hawthorne effect. That was the first insight. But you can go through maturation and interaction and test, retest, and all kinds of problems that occur. You always have to have controls and placebos and so on. And yet those kinds of experiments, those kinds of validations are rarely done in industry. So, if you introduce a wellness program, I once wrote a book on wellness programs years ago, and the research in that field, like, they'll give a wellness program to somebody and then they check productivity before the program and after, and the productivity always goes up. So they conclude that wellness programs, if you're more, they're making you more productive because all these people are becoming physically fit, which makes them more productive. That's nice in theory, but that's not really the reason. The reason is that any intervention will stimulate enthusiasm, which in turn stimulates productivity, and you have to control for that Hawthorne effect when you do the research. So, when you test the effects of training, you need to have a control group. It's kind of like the problem with employee selection, where if you give the test to incumbents, you get an attenuated sample. In the case of training, if you give the training to everybody and then see pre and post, you've contaminated the objective test with the Hawthorne effect. So the way to control for that is to introduce something else to a separate group and see what happens to their productivity, and see how well it's sustained over time. If the productivity is actually due to better physical fitness, you'll see that improvement will be sustained. But if it goes back to the mean where it was, it won't be because of the training. It was because for another reason, that there was a Hawthorne effect. So basically, these training programs are almost never evaluated. That's the thing. They'll use the participant reactions like they do in school, but they don't use these other more longer term. They don't use longer term approaches, such as what's happened to plant productivity, what's happened to the stock price, what's happened to sales per employee. These kinds of questions are really why you should be giving training. You should be either improving productivity or reducing costs. That's why training is strategic. It's strategic because you're trying to accomplish a goal that's part of the business strategy. The goal might be to implement a new technology. It might be to improve customer relationships. It might be to improve processes in some way. But if it's strategic, it's going to affect the bottom line. And they have to be able to show that, to say that the training served the purpose that it's supposed to serve. So it's another case where the HR really doesn't do what it should to make things work well. Okay, are there any questions about training and development at this point? Huh, they must pay well at Brooklyn College, yeah. Well, that's not exactly what, how I got the money. I did some other things. Even after the explosion, people were not notified by the government. They went outside and were exposed to radiation. Oh, you're talking about Chernobyl. You were there? Olga, my God. Olga, where did you live? In Belarus or?
I was in Belarus, yes.
Yeah,
I
oh my
was 6
God.
years old when the explosion happened.
Jeez. Did you know a lot of people who got killed?
Well, I mean, in our town, it wasn't affected as much, but people started, kind of moving around, trying to find better places. But the government wasn't, communicating anything at all. So people were going to like resorts, trying to stay there. But when they came there, they saw that the radiation rates were higher than where they came from.
Jeez. There was a movie I saw, I think it was on HBO. I think it was called Chernobyl.
There's a one on Netflix. I think on Netflix is a great
Maybe it was,
documentary.
the one I'm thinking of was on HBO in 2009.
Or was it on Hulu or something? Oh yeah, I think that's the one.
Well, it could be from HBO and it could be on Hulu and Netflix too. So, but basically, I think it was worth watching. I don't know how accurate it was or not, but I think a lot of the things it showed there were, characteristic of these kinds of political systems that don't function well, and they try to cover things up, and it only makes things worse over time. Sort of like with Coma, with the COVID thing that's coming out now, but with Chernobyl, they were trying to hide that it even occurred, and they couldn't. I mean, you couldn't be in denial. It was like too big. They were inches away from just destroying all of Eastern Europe. It was really huge. I mean, it could have affected Scandinavia. It would have been like really huge. And like, according to the movie, I assume it's true, but I'd want to check it, so don't take my word for it totally. That like a lot of the workers voluntarily sacrificed their lives to stop a major explosion that would have been even far worse. So you kind of left with like their amazing heroism, but the stupidity of the people that oversaw it and tried to hide it, didn't do anything quickly enough, and also that designed the thing in the first place. So basically, and these things happen, in all countries. Where you get politics mixed with engineering, you're going to get problems. Okay, so basically, any questions about training? You're all trained out. You've had enough training for one day.
I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
A lot of employees, I mean, if you hire a new people, right, to train them, they will leave I think a lot of people would quit after being trained. So with that being said, do you think the company willing to hire experienced people rather than actually training them?
Yeah. Companies do both. There's no question. I would say American companies have a pretty strong preference for hiring people with experience. That's why in the US, people work within a given job function. So like if you're hired in marketing, the likelihood of your leaving marketing is small, right? People are hired into a field and then they stay in the field. And if they need to change jobs, they'll change within that field, within marketing, say. But if they stay with the company, they'll move up the ladder in marketing. All right, but they stay in the field. That way they need much less training time. In Japan, they use a different approach. In Japan and Korea, I think I think also in Korea, they they hire people into the company and they don't view them as short-term employees. They view them as lifetime employees. So the employees expect to stay there for their whole career. And so they're able to train them in one thing, work for a few years, then train them in something else. And so they'll move around. So the training in those Eastern companies is going to be more expensive than in America. The Japanese will do a much better job of training than we do in terms of like training programs and you know, teaching people the right way to do it and so on. They'll spend a lot more money, but then they'll have people that stay there forever. And so they're willing to spend a lot more in training and job rotation than we are because they have lifetime employment. Whereas so they'll be less likely in those countries, they'll be less likely to just stay in one field their whole lives. You know, if you look at the SAS case, they mentioned that in there, they rotate people into other jobs. They say they have 4 careers. And basically, when they do that, that's like another way of like retaining employees, because you know, after you've done something for about 20 years or even less, maybe 10 years or even less, you know, you start to say, well, is there anything else? I know this already. You know, so, but in America, you stay in that field. Maybe you do new things, but you stay in the field. Whereas in some companies in the US and also more commonly in Japan and Korea, you get rotated around the company. So if you can do that, I mean, that's actually unusual. If you can do that, it makes life a lot more interesting, because then you know, you move from being a statistician to being a salesperson or whatever, you know, and you learn new things. So yeah, in most American companies, they hire trained people already. Okay. I don't know if G-Way, did that make sense?
Oh yeah. Sorry.
Okay.
I forgot to turn on my.
Okay, no problem.
Oh,
Okay.
one more thing.
Okay, please.
For the minimum wage, do they pay the Chinese a minimum wage?
Is there a minimum wage in China? You mean mainland China?
But not for the Chinese though. They pay a lower wage for people, you know, undergoing training, because they don't have experience and skills. So I don't think they pay as much as you know, for the experienced ones. I'm not
Is that
sure
so?
here.
Yeah, I know in some countries they have, I see in China, they have different minimum wages by city. So like in Beijing, it's 24 yuan. In Shanghai, 22. Tianjin, 20.8. And Guangdong, 14. Now, whether that there's so there's differences in provinces. The highest rates in Shanghai are 24.80. Yeah, I haven't really looked at China. It's interesting.
What about in New York though? Do we pay them a minimum wage for training?
If you're in training, yeah, there's no, if you're working someplace full time, you'll still get the minimum wage, even if they're training you. Unless they set something up, like they say there's a school and you're not really working or some such thing, then it might be different. But if you're formally employed and they're training you, you'll still get the minimum wage or more.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm just looking for this. Some
Professor, I
countries
do
do it.
think that, oh,
Go
sorry.
ahead. Go ahead.
I do think that in America, they are a little bit more lenient in terms of hiring people with experience than other countries.
What do you mean by
they're,
lenient?
I think they're more likely to hire someone with minimal experience as opposed to like, because I've lived in Europe and I was born in Russia. So like in Russia, it's very, very unlikely. There's no middle, like, there's like no middle class. So it's very difficult for someone to, if they're poor, it's very difficult for a person to become even somewhat financially stable.
Because they make too little.
It's just there's the lack of opportunities and the huge wealth gap, and as well as the political structure.
Yeah, I believe you. I'm just looking for this thing about training people. So you're saying like wages are lower there? Yeah, well.
Not just that, it's kind of like there's literally like only, I can name the number of ways you can become successful in Russia on one hand, and it's like like listed, and yeah, a lot of it like, yeah, and most of it isn't legal.
Yeah,
like yeah, and people overlook it, so like, because it's just like it's such a lack of opportunity.
Well,
like my grandfather
what creates
was born
opportunity is
poor.
economic freedom. If there's more entrepreneurship, then there's more job opportunities. I mean, they go together. And if Russia had a socialist economy, the USSR, for a long time. It ended in '89, but there are a lot of remnants of it still, I'm sure, throughout the economy, which serve as roadblocks to starting businesses, and that's why a lot of people immigrate to the U.S. But we're in the middle of trying to imitate the Soviet Union at this point, so I don't know what the outcome is going to be. The more we do, the more it'll be like that.
I don't even know, like, because and I say this from my family's experience, my grandfather was born dirt poor, and by dirt poor I mean like not American poor, like dirt poor. And he made something of himself, and that's very uncommon in a country like that. And he's just like, he's like a robotic human being. Like my grandfather, I love him to death, but a borderline sociopathic. Like, and he never talks about how he obtained it or how he achieved success.
He
like
succeeded under communism.
Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah. Well, I'd be interested in hearing about it. Probably can't talk about it right now. Maybe you can tell me sometime. But
I'll tell you, I from what like my dad shared, which is very minimal, but yeah, I'll tell you, it's an interesting story. But he's a very, very secretive person, and I think it just kind of like countries like that really like if you do make it, you turn into like almost like a shell of a person.
There's a book by Friedrich von Hayek called The Road to Serfdom, which I recommend to everyone in the class, but I'm mentioning it because there's a F.A. Hayek, Road to Serfdom. There's a chapter in there, why the worst get to the top. And it kind of addresses some of the things you're kind of alluding to. But basically, I mean, that book kind of predicted what we're seeing now, where like the government in a democracy becomes independent of the elected process. In other words, they delegate authority to administrative agencies who become de facto governments in their own right and can't be removed. Basically, they're dictatorships. That's basically what America is now. It's not really. I don't think it's really a republic at this point, because like things like the State Department and they have no one controls them. They're basically deciding things by themselves. The media is basically under their control also. So
would you say it's different than Putin's rule? I mean, which is,
yeah,
I
of
think
course,
it's more
different. I mean, we're in
totalitarian.
Russia. You know, it's
Yeah.
like we don't have that history. But years ago, there was a guy named Clark Kerr who was he became the president of Berkeley, and it was right during the 60s riots, and he kind of got a lot of notoriety because he kind of mismanaged that, but he had done a lot of work on the universities. He coined this term multiversity, but one of the things he was best known for was he wrote what was the title of that book? Well, he wrote articles as well as a book, and I read when I was in a doctoral student. I can't remember the title now, but I can look it up. But the basic idea is pretty simple. I'm just typing in convergence hypothesis, Kerr, and the future of industrial societies. That's the title of the book. When I read it in graduate school, I interpreted it to mean that the Soviet Union and the US would basically converge on a quasi-socialistic economy. But actually what occurred, and I think he was more right than I thought at the time, is that both the US and the USSR and China and probably most of Europe have converged on what might be called a semi-totalitarian or semi-authoritarian system.
Yeah.
With varying attributes, but one with basically an unaccountable government combined with a high degree of state intervention, with super rich elites who obtain their money but through state subsidization. You see, that's true in Russia. There's a guy who lives around here whose brother-in-law is named Blavatnik. I don't know if that name means anything to you.
Yeah, I know who that is.
Yeah, he became like one of the 10 or 15 richest people in the world, largely through weaseling into stuff that didn't belong to him. And
it's very common.
The guy that lives around here, his kids all got into Harvard and Yale. Every one of them. I'm sure it was through the mother. The brother-in-law.
It's not a abnormal thing. What he did is it's not what they most of them do. The Russian oligarchy.
Yeah. So there's that, and it's all done. I've talked about the Fed, and this has been going on for a long time. That's why it was important for you guys to listen to what Abby Joseph Cohn said. I mean, she is of that. I mean, you're not going to get to know that world unless you expose yourself to it. It's one thing to sit around saying how evil the 1% is, and you're going to throw water balloons and eggs at them. But it's another thing to actually become a success. And, I don't know what people think they're going to do, throw water balloons for the rest of their lives, or they're going to try to become a success. So you need to deal with reality. I'm not saying I like our system. I think I've made clear I don't. But at the same time, you have to deal with the reality of the system.
Professor, are you talking about Joseph A.B. Cohen, the speaker from Thursday's presentation?
Yeah.
I mean, I listened to her presentation.
Very good.
I agree most part, but she speaks some nonsense as well. When she asked if there's any bubbles in the economy, she said, "Well, I don't see any." And when I did some research on her, he actually she predicted, wrong about the financial crisis during the '08.
Yeah,
With, she was talking about, well, there was no bubble, and and
yeah,
everything was going well
yeah.
in 2007. And now she's repeating the same rhetoric, to the, to us, to her audience. I mean, that kind of made me upset, that
It made you
she's,
upset. Yeah,
yeah,
I
that,
was aware of that. I'm glad you mentioned that. I wasn't going to argue with her, of course. Not that I had any facility to. Everyone was on mute. But basically, I disagreed with about a third of what she said. I agree. I think, first of all, saying that there's no inflation is nonsensical. Uh, there's been plenty of inflation all along. It's just been concentrated in a few areas where the banks have been most aggressive in lending, especially real estate, housing. Uh, so you have a situation where there's no inflation, but no one can afford to buy a house because you need to have $1 million to buy a house. So, but there's no inflation, so there's that. And, this thing with the bubbles, there was a lot of stuff. And I think it's good you're questioning it, GOA. That's exactly why I wanted you to attend it. More people should have. I mean, I'm glad you did, but there were only about 50 students online, and there really should have been, I would say, like 3,000 students online, because that's, you're not going to sort of see how it works. I was able to get exposed to that sort of thing throughout my life in various ways. My parents helped me, and I realized I should do it, and so that gave me advantages. And you want to get those advantages too. So you want to get exposed to that, even if you don't like them, and just seeing what it is helps you a great deal. It helps you navigate the world a great deal. Um, and
Adaptability.
yeah, and knowing how to behave under given situations. So it's really important to attend stuff like that. I can't emphasize it enough. All right, now I'm going to spend, we've still got oh, we're almost out of time. Well, I'm going to do a quick review of some writing issues, and I'll try to do it in about 20 minutes. So that'll get us out on time.
Professor, for the writing, did you grade it already? Because I haven't received it. I haven't received the grade on
Did you get an
Blackboard.
email?
No, nothing.
Everyone should have gotten an email. Do you have the college email? Do you use the college email, or do you have Gmail or something else?
Yeah, I checked on both Gmail and college, the Microsoft mail, and that's
Okay.
I have not received yet.
Okay. Did you check the spam folder?
Yeah, I did.
All right. Your name is Wei Chen, right?
No, it's Jawei. Start with the J. Well, I don't see my paper over, on your folder though. But I submitted already on the Blackboard. So if
All
I'm
right.
not sure. Yeah.
I'll have to look for it. Let me see. If I didn't download it, it may not have gone through. It may not have gone through on when you submitted it. But let me check that. We'll do that after class. So I'll do the writing first.
Professor, I just have a quick question.
Go ahead.
When it comes to education, I realize that employers, let's say somebody applies to a job with a lot of experience in that field, they would most likely pick the person that has a degree in that field and no experience rather than the person with tons of experience. Why do you think that is?
So in other words, they want someone with less experience.
And just because they have like the degree in that field, in that specific field, they would rather pick that person.
Oh, I know what you're talking about. Yeah, that gets back to what we were talking about with job analysis. Like, why do they require a degree, even though it's not really that germane to the job, and they pass over someone with more knowledge?
Right.
There are two or three basic explanations for why they like degrees. One is like signaling that obtaining a degree suggests that you're smart enough to finish the degree. So it's a sign of ability and persistence, let's say, and that it's a signal of being a competent employee. A second explanation is called human capital. The first one's called signaling. Human capital suggests that you learn stuff in the degree that you're going to use on the job, but you already know that that wasn't true, that the degree really didn't provide that much knowledge. Of course, there could be things that are not totally evident that the degree provides, such as like greater ability to communicate, better writing skills, things like that. But on the whole, you've already concluded that there wasn't really that much value added from the degree. So it could be signaling. A third explanation is like that employers like to feel that they're prestigious and that there's like an elite quality to working there. And so if they only hire people with degrees, then that shows that they're a high status employer. Okay, so those are three explanations. Now, in the case of your thing, the person you're thinking of, I doubt it's that human capital, because you've already concluded that. And you can have the same knowledge without the degree. I mean, in other words, what's often rewarded is like if you go to college for 4 years and 6 months, but you don't complete the degree, you don't get a proportionate reward for those years that you do if you finish the degree. So in other words, there's a disproportionate reward to simply having the degree. And that can't be due to any knowledge you pick up. It's simply getting the degree. So there's a certain reward to that. Now it might be, you might say, well, it's persistence or something like that. It's possible. But I think a more likely explanation is that, somebody who's been persistent at working there for a long time and knows the ropes, you would hope that they would want to reward that. But if they don't, and they're just giving degrees, it's probably because of a taste for prestige. Okay, so that would probably be my answer.
Okay, thank you.
I don't know. What do you think?
I honestly have no, I realized that a lot of the times that somebody goes for a job and just because let's say they have a degree in liberal arts or they have a degree in music or something like that, and they're applying for a social services job or something of that sort, something that has nothing to do with their degree, they would still obtain that job being that they have a degree rather than somebody that did not have a degree and had knowledge in that field and had experience
Yeah, I understand. Yeah, it seems unfair. As I talked about with job analysis, there's been like a lot of credentialism and inflation of credentials, stuff like that. And I think that's an example of it, to be honest. I don't think there's necessarily a good explanation.
I think it has a lot to do with the ability factor. Like you said, just
It could.
I feel like on paper, just on paper, like I work in a retail store for 10 years and I got experience and things like that, you know, versus a person who come in with like, you know, a business degree in management and sales or something like that. If they have no experience, I just feel like the company may see you as just being a more polished employee and individual. I feel like it's a branding thing also. I feel like employee attraction is real, you know. That's how I see it too. So
Good.
I think
Okay. Yeah, so that you believe more in the human capital
yeah,
explanation.
you know, nice lady comes in, she's dressed well, she's easy on the eyes, like all of I see it. I work in the field and I see a lot of this going on. So
well, appearance is, you know, for many jobs relevant. People don't like to hear that, but it is.
it's the truth.
So, you know, that is a factor, right? I mean, you know, if you want to be an announcer on TV news, you know, you got to look a certain way, you know, otherwise they're not going to consider you, you know, no matter how good you are. They don't hire the best, the smartest analysts. They hire the ones who look good on camera. So, you know, it's just part of, you know, the same thing if you work in a store or something. So, all right, so let's do a little bit. We're almost out of time, but maybe we can do half of it anyway. I wanted to, do I have the screen share on? I wanted to do some things on comma use. I referred a lot of you guys to this webpage. It's the extended rules for using commas of the online writing lab of Purdue, OWL, online writing lab. Comma use. I've already said that when you have two independent clauses or main clauses can stand on their own as a sentence. The game was over. The crowd refused to leave. Those are both independent clauses. When you join them with a fanboys or coordinating conjunction, for and, nor, but, or, yet, so, you insert a comma before the joining word. Now, this could be replaced, the fanboys can be replaced by a semicolon. It could also be replaced by a period and a capital "the" for the T. But if you do join two main clauses with a coordinating conjunction, I've said this before, you insert a comma. A lot of people left out the comma on the essays. Okay, introductory clauses. Okay, there are several categories that they address in one fell swoop, but let's go over a couple of them. The first one, while I was eating, the cat scratched at the door. While I was eating is a subordinate clause. Okay, it starts with while, which is a subordinating conjunction. You can easily find a list of subordinating conjunctions online. Just Google it. That's something Google is good for, is like finding like bits of information. It's good for that. Definition and examples, subordinating conjunctions. All right, they have them categorized. That's all well and good. You'll never remember that. After, as soon as long as, before, once, still, until, when, whenever, while, although, as though, even though, just as, though, whereas, in contrast to, as, because, in order that, those are all conjunctions. Where, wherever, whereas, provided that. All right, so there's hundreds of these kind of words. You're never going to remember them all. So basically, when you start out with a subordinate clause, that is a word that begins with a subordinating conjunction, you insert a comma at the end of the subordinating conjunction. While I was eating, because the alarm clock was broken, comma. If is a subordinating conjunction. If you are ill, comma, you ought to see a doctor. When the snow stops falling, comma. Okay, so when you start a sentence with a subordinate clause, you use a comma. All right, here's another group. If you start a sentence with an infinitive phrase, you get a comma. You know it's infinitive because it starts with to be or not to be. Those are infinitives. To get a seat, comma, you'd better come early. You insert a comma after an introductory infinitive phrase. Same thing with an introductory participial phrase. Having finished the test, comma, he left the room. As well with a long prepositional phrase. They say right here, over 4 words. Sources vary. If 4 words is okay. Sometimes you can not use a comma with 4 words. You could say 5 words is the cutoff, but 4 or 5 words, you insert a comma. So after the test, but before lunch, that's a 6-worder. After the test, but before lunch, that's a preposition. The difference between a preposition and a conjunction is that the preposition is not followed by a verb. The conjunction is followed by a verb. So if you go back to the subordinating conjunctions, while I was eating, while is followed by a conjunction. That's a subordinate clause. When there's no conjunction after the test, no verb after the test, but before lunch, then it's the prepositional phrase. If a prepositional phrase is longer than 5 words or 4 words, insert a comma at the end. Okay. Another place you insert commas is after introductory words, including adverbs that seem to modify the whole sentence. Here's some good examples. Well, perhaps he meant no harm. Yes, the package should arrive tomorrow. I'll add one with an adverb. This is a conjunctive adverb. However, you may not be satisfied with the results. One more, incidentally, you may have paid too much money. Okay, so if you start a sentence with an introductory word or an adverb that seems to modify the whole sentence stupendously, you would insert a comma after it. Now, this is a little more subtle. I've kind of addressed it a few times. If a phrase or word is not essential to the meaning of a sentence, I've been torturing you guys with restrictive and non-restrictive clauses and appositional phrases that are restrictive versus non-restrictive, and this is the same thing with any element that's not. It could be true of relative clauses. It could be true of appositives. Appositives are nouns followed by another noun. It could be true of just a word or a phrase introduced into a sentence. To determine whether something's unimportant or non-restrictive and unimportant mean almost the same thing. Ask if you leave it out, does the sentence still make sense? Does the clause or phrase interrupt the flow of words without really changing the meaning? And also, if you move it to a different position, does it still mean the same thing? So let's look at a few examples. This is a relative clause that's non-restrictive. They inserted it. Non-restrictive clauses, relative clauses should start with which. Restrictive ones start with that. You can start a restrictive one with which, but I like to keep them oil and water, separate them. Start restrictive ones with that, non-restrictive ones with which. The British use which for both more aggressively. That Tuesday, which happens to be my birthday, is the only day when I'm available. If you take out which happens to be my birthday, the sentence means the same thing. There's no change in the meaning. You're going to be available that Tuesday. You're adding information with the non-restrictive relative.
Say that one again.
clause.
Can you repeat that one, Professor?
If you take out the which happens to be my birthday, the sentence means the same thing. Okay, but you're adding information with the non-restrictive relative clause. You're adding the information that it's your birthday. It's the Tuesday is the only day when you're going to be available. That doesn't change, but you're giving some free information. By the way, that happens to be my birthday. If it's not essential, it's not restrictive. You're not saying there's two different Tuesdays, one that's your birthday, one when you're available. If you're saying the Tuesday that I'm available is my birthday, but the Tuesday that I'm not available is not my birthday. If you're talking about two Tuesdays, then you use that with no comma, then it's essential. But if you're just adding information about the one Tuesday, then you insert commas. Here in this sentence, you can ignore the first sentence, the second one here that I put in blue. Yes, Khalif, I'm sorry. Khalif?
Yes, I'm here. I'm listening.
Did you want to add something or?
Oh, no,
You did
no.
already.
I think I raised my hand, but yeah, I'm a little late.
Okay. Okay, Khalif. The food, on the other hand, is rather bland. On the other hand is unimportant. It doesn't change. It interrupts the sentence, but it doesn't change the meaning. The food, on the other hand, is rather bland. You insert commas before it and after it. It's parenthetical. So you insert commas. Here's another one. In this case, however, you seem to have overreacted. If you take out however, does the meaning change? No. So you insert commas before it and after it. Now, they add the also important point that if you do not use commas, then the element is essential. And you shouldn't use, if it is essential, then you shouldn't use commas. Both are true, such as clauses beginning with that and clauses after nouns, that clauses after nouns. That's right, those are always essential. So the book that I borrowed from you is excellent. Okay, you borrowed a certain book. There's another book you didn't borrow. It's not excellent. The book that I did borrow is excellent. The apples that fell out of the basket are bruised. The ones that didn't fall are not bruised. The player who won the trophy, there's only one player. You don't insert commas. You're talking about a specific player. All right. There's another time when you use that in connection with belief or mental actions, you don't insert commas. I contend that it was wrong. They wished that warm weather would appear, and I feel the same way. Other essential elements do not get commas. Okay, so if something is essential, if you're not throwing in information, but you're saying it's a characteristic of the main subject of the sentence, you don't insert commas. Students who cheat only harm themselves. You're not saying that all students harm themselves. You're saying that students who cheat, just that subcategory, that's essential to the meaning. so you don't insert commas. There's 3 babies, one wearing a yellow jumpsuit. The baby wearing a yellow jumpsuit is my niece. Okay, the other one isn't. All right, you don't insert commas. The candidate who had the least money lost the election. Only one had the least money. Then they give a bunch of additional examples. You can look at them yourself. It's owlpurdue.edu under extended comma rules. Just to pick one at random, Tom, the captain of the team, was injured in the game. This is what's called an appositive. It's a noun, captain, that follows another noun, Tom. Tom's also a proper name, but it's also a noun. When one noun follows another, it's an appositive. When the noun that follows adds information, you insert commas around the appositive. Same thing with the next one. You're talking to someone directly. If it's up to you, comma, Jane, comma, you already know who the person is. There's no question of identity. You're adding information. You're saying the name, but you already know the person is already identified because you're talking directly to them. All right. So another place you use commas is in a list. All right. So you use it in a list of 3 items. A lot of people get confused when it's a list of 2 verbs, but you don't insert a comma when you have only 2, even if it's 2 verbs. So, okay, so the Constitution establishes the legislative comma, executive comma, and judicial branches of government. All right, so basically there, you insert the commas between each item, putting it before the and. That's always a controversy. It's called the Oxford comma, named after a printer at Oxford University Press. Not because of the university, it's because of this printer guy. And basically, the question is whether to insert the comma or not. A lot of writers, including Strunk and White, believe that you should insert the Oxford comma. Okay, so although it's technically optional from a grammatical standpoint, a lot of people prefer it. Coordinate adjectives. We're out of time already, so I'll just do this and then we'll finish up next time. We've got about a third of the material left. In fact, we're out of time now, so I'll start next time with coordinate adjectives, and there's about 3 or 4 of these. So those are some overview. Yes, Khalif. I keep saying Khalil. How do I say that?
You think you could post, like, I don't know what you were looking at. I seen something from Purdue. You think you could post it on?
Yeah, I'll send you the link. Yeah, it's available online. It's easy to get.
And another question. So when you offering information that's not necessary, like, do you need to do those things?
You don't, but you may want to. Okay. For example, I'm gonna.
I feel like that's the juice. You do need. I feel like you do need juice and substance to conversation.
Yeah.
And to just things we do in life.
Yeah, that's right. So in other words, if I say something like the Vietnam War, which was fought from the 1950s to 1970s, was expensive, something like that. You're saying, can you leave this out? And the answer is yes. You could just write a sentence. It doesn't change the meaning of the sentence to say the Vietnam War was expensive. What you're doing with that extra relative clause there, which was fought from the 1950s to the 1970s, is add information about the Vietnam War. So you're adding some information, but you're not fundamentally changing the meaning of the sentence. If you took it out, it means almost the same thing. So you insert the commas. Can you leave it out? The answer is of course. let's say you wanted to leave it out. The Vietnam War was expensive. You could do this. It was fought from the 1950s to the 1970s. All right,
Okay.
you could say that. Okay, you could do the same thing.
The Vietnam War was expensive. Boom.
Okay, so this has the exact same meaning as the other thing, except you've done it with two sentences, which is fine. You know, either way is good. As long as the trouble, you get into trouble when the sentences start to exceed 25 or 30 words. That you don't want like really long sentences with a lot of clauses like that. One or two is good. It spices up the right. I think the question isn't, can you not do it? The question is, what is going to make my writing more interesting? What's going to make it more readable? What's going to make it more interesting? If I have just staccato short sentences, it'll be readable, but it won't be interesting. If I start throwing in a few relative clauses, it'll make it more interesting. But if I have too many relative clauses, then it's going to get unreadable.
So like a balance in between.
Exactly, Cleve.
Short, simple, sweet, efficient, light.
Yeah.
Rich talk.
All right.
I really appreciate that you made us write the paper just one page.
What's that, Crystal? I'm sorry.
I just appreciate that you made us write the paper just into one page.
Sure.
It's just like clear.
Yeah, well, that helps too. I mean, in business, you know, when I went to school, everyone always said the longer the paper, the better a student you are. And I always had that impression. When I went into the business world, it was the exact reverse, especially at the better firms. They do not want long-winded stuff. They want short and sweet, concise. What Andre Fontenelle and my other class, the career counselor guy, spoke to my other class. He said, you should be able to do an elevator pitch. An elevator pitch is like a sales talk you can give in an elevator. So the time it takes to ride up in the elevator, you should be able to explain it. That's the kind of writing they want in business. It's not, they don't want a dissertation. All right, save that for your liberal arts classes. Okay, but for business, you want short and sweet and concise, direct, clear. You know, that's the kind of writing they're looking for. Okay, anyone else? Question? Okay, gang, that in that case, Khalif, any good basketball games tonight?
Tonight, I got to check the schedule, but I know Monday Nets versus Knicks.